my perspective, I think the phone is undervalued, underrated in today's communications climate.
So today we're talking about email versus call. When do you email and when do you call?
I think ultimately there is a tendency to be afraid to pick up the phone, and I think that a lot of the times something that could take 15 minutes to kind of craft in an email to explain, well, we could do this or we could do this, and here are the different options. Like if there's sort of a decision tree to be made, you can pick up the phone and say in 30 seconds, hey, like this isn't going to work, but maybe we can do this instead. What do you think? And just come to a resolution a lot faster. So I am totally in favor of picking up the phone and having a conversation with someone when there is a quick decision to be made that is complicated to explain in different ways. And people should not be afraid to pick up the phone and have a conversation with the people they're collaborating with. What about you, Noah?
Spoken like a true old guy. Yeah. Well, I feel like this was kind of our most clickbaity topic because, you hear a lot, people always say like, oh, that meeting could have been an email or whatever. And I feel like, so also clickbaity in phone versus email, because I think, we have a lot of modes of communication. And so for me, it's a lot of times it's like thinking, what's the best mode of communication for whatever we're trying to kind of get across. And so a lot of times it's thinking about the goal and kind of working backwards, like for sure, if you're trying to clear up a misunderstanding or anything like that, for sure, call is great. And I think that like, just the tone of voice and the demeanor can diffuse and prevent misunderstandings from becoming bigger things, and then anything with like sort of a lot of information to absorb a lot of times is better as an email. The kind of big decision tree factors is for me, is it like an A-B decision or an A-B-C decision where I can sort of send an email and be like, okay, we're looking at options A, B, or C, which one is your preference? But if it's a question of like, okay, I feel like maybe the creative is misaligned with your brand, I think I need to understand your brand better, or like the goals of your brand better. Maybe that's better as a call, because that's a little more exploratory. And sometimes there's like that can become a little more of a kind of a journalistic process. A lot of times for me, calls can be like a little more journalistic, where you're sort of like guessing and testing, like, oh, I hear you say that, so I'm going to repeat back to you this, do you agree? Or like, is your brand, I don't know, like, do you see it more like jazz or more like rock and roll? Or I don't know what those examples would be, but there's a lot of stuff that can kind of come out of that kind of more free form thing that's a lot tougher to get to in emails.
I think the main thing is that like conversations are undervalued, but getting back to the idea of conversations, if there are in the sort of earlier stages where you're trying to understand, like you mentioned, the brand identity or what the messaging should be, then having a real meeting and saying, okay, what are the objectives? What are we trying to communicate? Who is the audience? And sort of getting into some of the meat of the planning, that works way better in a conversation. At least I connect with that better than seeing maybe even that same information in a briefing document, because you can sort of go a little bit deeper when you're having those conversations.
Totally. And I think that's part, for me, like a big thing in the decision tree is just like, will additional context benefit the decision making? And I thought your example about the change request was great, because that's one where, let's say like, and this is a prime example that comes up for me, is a client will ask for a change and they'll say, okay, we want to do this change. How much would it cost? And I know in the back of my mind, based on having worked with them, that probably the cost is going to be more than they would really want, ideally for their budget. But a lot of times I want to sort of unpack, well, like what are you trying to accomplish with this change? Because I can maybe give you a bunch of options that accomplish this goal as well or better, but that's going to be much more palatable to you, let's say, budget wise. And I feel like that's really the kind of context you're only getting often on a call.
Hey, no, I want to ask you something. Do you ever just pick up the phone and call your client and just say, like, hey, how's it going? If you haven't talked to them in a while, is there anyone that you have that kind of connection with? Because I think that having a phone call does create some kind of, deeper relationship with the people that you're collaborating with than simply email or text.